Okay, Phil, can you hear us?
Keep me honest tonight. Honest. Happy New Year.
Honest here on the TIG,
Tick.
keeping us honest of what we can and can't do.
I agree with the TIG master.
David, we're
here.
gonna
We
go
not
ahead and get
changing.
started.
Todd, TIG master. Okay.
Miss
there you go.
Ashmere,
There
can you
go.
hear
He
us?
got a smile. He likes that better than. All right, I got you. Let me know when we're ready.
Katie, can you check to make sure Miss Ashmere can hear us? And then you can unmute and you can get started.
You started. Happy New Year to everyone. Thank you for attending the Workforce Development Business Committee meeting. This is our first meeting of 2021, and I'm hoping everyone had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We're going to begin by having everyone to introduce themselves, first starting with my Dynamite committee members. So the young lady representing District 4.
Happy New Year, this is Renee Johnson, District 4.
Hey, Renee. The young lady representing City Council at Large.
Good afternoon, Dimple Ashburn, committee member.
Hello,
Happy-
Dimple. All right, and so thank you all. And so we're going to go around the room. I got the outstanding staff in here to keep me honest. We're going to start off with our legal representative, Ms. Anna.
Anna Schloinis, City Attorney's Office.
Todd DeLong, Economic Development.
Tracy Dodson, City Manager's Office.
Donata Jackson, Office of Constituent Services.
Stephen Coker, Charlotte Business Inclusion Program.
Okay. So thank you, everyone. So we have a very busy agenda before us. Tracy says all is my fault because of December. She's right. So we're going to try to play catch up today. We have 3 committee members. There's no action items for us today, but it's great information. And so we're going to first start off about our committee schedule. And Tracy?
Janai, do you have the schedule by chance? Thank you. So everybody should have received a copy of the schedule and our meeting dates, which is the first Monday of each month. And if I remember correctly, we will be targeting 12 o'clock. I'm looking at you, Donna. Each Monday, in order to try to not overload
That's right.
corporate communications and the team. We're moving it up, keeping it on a Monday, but allowing them to have a little bit of breathing room
Exactly.
between city council meetings and in the committee meeting.
And before we move forward, my vice chair has joined, and the distinguished granddad from District 2. Vice Chair.
Hello, everyone. Tarek Bakari, Vice Chair.
Happy New Year, sir.
Same to you, sir.
Granddad from District 2.
Hello, everybody. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Malcolm. How was that first Christmas with the little one?
It was nice. Everyone's safe and healthy.
All right. So you heard the meeting schedule. Are there any comments, committee? Are we okay with the first Monday at 12 noon of the month? Can I get a thumbs up? I see Vice Chair saying yes. All right, great, fantastic. All righty. I think the second item is our,
Tax increment grant policy.
and so you're gonna turn it over to Todd TIG Master DeLong.
Yes.
Take us away, Todd.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's wonderful to be here this afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. Happy New Year. Last year, all of about a month ago, but it was still last year, we touched on the TIC policy. Before we get started today, I wanted to do a quick recap of last year's meeting and then start to talk about the continuation of that conversation as we carry forward into 2021. Next slide, please. So as we talked about in the last meeting, we talked about the purpose of the tax increment grant program, our policy, and we talked a little bit about the summary of activity. And what's new a little bit this afternoon is going to be this tools. We have a matrix we're going to share with you about the different tools we have, because one of the things we talked about in the last meeting was how there are some projects that may not be the best for tax increment grant as a tool, and there are other tools that may be better suited for those projects. A lot of that comes down to the project budget or the project value, just because there may not be enough tax increment that gets generated by the project that can support the type of investment that might be needed to make the development work. And then we'll end with a staff recommendation. Next slide, please. So we talk about the purpose, why do we do tax increment grants? And it comes down to, it opens up an opportunity for us to enter into public-private partnerships in a way for us to influence the type of development we may want to see take place. We have a long, successful history of public-private partnerships in Charlotte. Tax increment grants are just one mechanism in which we can enter into a partnership with the private sector to deliver a development that is financially feasible and provides opportunities to further the goals of the city and the community. This is one of the best tools available for us for transformative projects, though it is not a one-size-fits-all solution, as we talked about in the last meeting, and we'll talk about a little bit more today. In many cases, we talk about the type of improvements that can be reimbursed through a tax increment grant. They are going to be for limited purposes, infrastructure, cultural facilities, public parking facilities, and so forth. The county does usually participate in our tax increment grant, but not always. We do have a handful of tax increment grant agreements where the county does not participate. Next slide, please. So we talk about our policy. Now, the policy is from 2007. It does seem a bit dated, but there is enough flexibility in there that it actually still applies to where we are today. And what is not in the policy, there aren't specific restrictions or prescriptive measures what we have to take to do things and to enter into some type of an agreement that uses tax increment. It actually allows us the flexibility to do what we need to do as council changes and as the priorities of council changes over time. Again, the justification of the use is a public purpose. We briefly touched on this in our last meeting about what a public purpose is. Again, that comes down to generally infrastructure, public parking, cultural facilities, and so forth. And one of the things I think caught in the conversation last time was about the public parking. And is public parking a justifiable public purpose for us to enter into an agreement using tax increment grant? And I want to kind of emphasize a point because I don't think we articulated it well the last time, is that the public purpose, the infrastructure, parking, and so forth, may be the legal justification for which that causes us or allows us to participate in these agreements. It's not necessarily the reason why we participate in these agreements. And so we got to think of the bigger picture of why we're participating in the agreement, and think about an example of the Metropolitan. When we entered into an agreement with the Metropolitan back in 2006, part of that was for public parking, and there was also an agreement for Little Sugar Creek Greenway. It was a large development. The parking piece was just a component. It's not like the city came out and said, we need more public parking in that area. The parking was going to occur, but what happened was we wanted to see a certain type of development that would be delivered to the community, that would benefit the community and the public. And one way to help support that from a feasibility perspective is through supporting the public parking in there. And it's one way for us to legally enter into a partnership arrangement. Another example would be a transit-oriented development. Let's take a hypothetical scenario along the Blue Line, and particularly Blue Line extension, where the market may not be there to support structured parking or the type of density or intensity or scale of development we'd like to see. One way that we can actually help support that and encourage a market to be a little faster or to occur a little faster is through supporting public parking in way of a structured parking. It's more costly for a developer, particularly when the market's not there yet to pay for it. And in a place like, say, on the Blue Line extension, you still have some office tenants and other folks who are looking for 5 to 6 spaces per thousand, which doesn't really meet the type of development we want to see. So we try to have sort of a give and take on some of that. And one way of doing that is helping through this public purpose or through a public parking, which allows us to enter into a tax increment grant.
So Todd, can you go back to that previous slide? So let me just reiterate something you said. I think it is how we need to change the narrative, that the park is just for us legally to be engaged. I think, to your point, we need to concentrate. What are we trying to focus on? What we want developed? So I take the other example that I think to me is very special too, is when Councilman Graham was working at Justice C. Smith, heading up their development, and we did Mosaic Village. Now, I don't think we provide gap financing for the 77 parking spaces that we got, but we wanted to have that mixed use, that student housing, those small businesses along the corridor. And so committee, we could think about, to Todd's point, we using TIG so we can get the development we want and not focus on so much that it's just for parking, but parking just a legal entity. So I just think we,
Absolutely.
okay, just want to reiterate that.
Next slide, please. So this is one we spent a little bit of time in the last discussion about what do we actually get out of project values through our tax increment grant? Because there is some assumption that even for $1 million project, let's just use a tax increment grant to support the developer to do that project. Unfortunately, $1 million of a project value or new incremental taxes it doesn't really generate a whole lot of revenue that we can put into or invest into that project. Generally speaking, it doesn't really become doable or feasible until we get to around that $50 million project value. Now, there are some that might have justification, say around 30 to 50, but it's not as frequently and it's not as often. But generally speaking, 50 million plus is generally where we're going to be at with the tax increment grant. And I'll get to in the slide a little bit later about what can we do to support those projects that are less than $50 million, because we do have some where we have easy things for under $1 million, and then we have some that are relatively, quote-unquote, easy for above $50 million. But what do we do for those smaller or mid-sized project values?
And Todd, I agree with it. We could talk about what additional tools we have, because when I think about all the great work we do in the corridors, a lot of the new project would not generate the $50 million threshold, but if we can find a way to still support them, I think.
That's right.
I know Councilmember Johnson, Councilmember Graham, and Councilmember Watlington would be very appreciative.
That's right. Next slide, please. So we talk about activity of tax increment grants. You know, we haven't used these as frequently as some people might think we do. And generally, we've used about one per year, although we did have 3 in 2020. So 2020 was a fairly big year. It was pretty active with Eastland, Valentine.
We're here to get work done.
Yeah. So 7 of the 17 that we've had since 2004 are city only. And so it tells you the majority of these do include a partnership with the county. So the county's partnership on this is incredibly important to most of these projects, particularly those of smaller property value or project value, because they do make up 2/3 of the tax revenue. So without them, then it's generating nearly as much in terms of incremental revenue that can go back to it. So talk about the private leverage. It's one of the bigger ones we get into when we talk about return on investment through our tax increment program. Our goal is generally 10 to 1, meaning that we would like to see $10 of private investment for every dollar that we put in. Since 2004, we have had a leverage ratio of 28 to 1. And then since 2015, we've had a leverage ratio of 119 to 1. So from a leverage perspective, we're doing pretty good. And you know, I think this is going to continue as we get into 2021 and 2022 and talk about some of the projects we're thinking through that's in the pipeline to come through with the tax increment program. Next slide, please. So this is the one, and I'm sorry if you can't read it very well here. What this lays out are 3 basic tools that we have for supporting development. One is the business matching grants, another is through our corridors of opportunity, and then the other is through our public-private partnerships. So in each of those categories, we have a different set of tools that we can help support the type of development we might want to see in the city. So let's start with the business matching grants. You know, those are your facade, security, brownfield, interior upfit. The general project size for those programs or those tools are less than $5 million. Now, we do have some that get over $20 million and $40 million, but generally speaking, those are $5 million rehabs or rehabilitations of properties. Now, the council priorities that we have for those tools are eliminating blight, creating strong local economies, increasing safety, increased private investment in under-invested communities. Some of our examples included the American Deli, Toucan Louie's, the Keith Clinic, Cup Clucks Coffee. Thrift Roads has a number of properties that have taken advantage of this, as well as Beatty's Ford and Beatty's Ford and LaSalle, just most recently with some of the hyper-focused programs that we're trying to do there. Which leads us into corridors of opportunity. And the corridors of opportunity, when that came about last year, we heard loud and clear of council's directive to have a little more focused investment and time into certain areas in our community. And what we realized is that we didn't have the best tools to be as flexible and nimble as we needed to be to participate in some of these partnerships with developers who are coming out and stepping forward and saying, we're leaning into this area, we want to be supported, and we want to support the community, and we need some help. And that's where we saw and identified some really wonderful partnership opportunities. General project sizes for these are going to be anywhere between $1 and $15 to $20 million. The priorities listed on here are going to be similar to what we have for facade and security grants. These will support public-private partnerships in higher priority areas. They complement, they don't supersede or take it the place of, but they do complement our business matching grants. So think of it as sort of piggybacking on different tools that we have. And as a couple examples are the partnerships at Beatty's Ford and LaSalle and the Five Points area. Lastly, we talk about public-private partnerships. That's where we get into our reimbursement agreements through tax increment and CIP. These are the bigger ones, the $50 million plus. These generally goes for infrastructure investments, roads, streetscapes, parking decks, gap funding if that needs to be the case. So the counts of priorities we look at here are going to be transportation, connectivity, mobility, tax-based expansion, and affordable workforce housing and MWSB utilization. Some examples recently on these are going to be Camp North End, which is CIP, Ballantyne Reimagine, which utilized both CIP and tax increment, First Ward, which utilized both CIP and tax increment, and the Tanger Outlets, and Pearl Park were both TIGs as well.
So stay there for a minute. I got two questions. First, Councilmember Ashmere, then Councilmember Winston. Councilmember Ashmere?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 3 points here. So for this slide right here, do we have the budget for each tool? So how much have we allocated for corridors of opportunity and business matching grants?
So corridors of opportunity, we have allocated, I believe, $24 million.
$24.5 million is what you allocated in this year's budget for corridors of opportunity. Of that, $5 million was set aside specifically for economic development, of which that's what we're using the community development grants as well as the loan to fund.
Yeah, and for the business matching grants, we had about $2 million that we carried over from last year. This has been an unprecedented year for us with our business matching grants, and we have actually been awarded over $3 million so far this year. And so we have actually used some of the corridor of opportunity funding to help support the business matching grants because they are going to support a lot, in many cases, small businesses in some of our distressed corridors.
So considering the demand we are seeing, should we be looking at allocating additional resources, especially for corridors of opportunity and business matching grant? So that's one question I have. You don't have to have an answer today, but if that's something a committee can think about, and also if you could help us gather data as to what's been the ask in the past and what is the direction we are heading in so that we can make recommendations to the budget committee or to the upcoming budget discussion as we are preparing for the new year. Second question I have, I know we have all talked about this, looking at economic development from high level, right? We are looking at it where let's look at overall whether that's really helping us meet our priorities. And I think it's a good place to start. However, I also want us to keep in mind that when we are looking at economic development, we are also looking at other priorities, and we are not creating other issues such as congestions and traffic where it meets one priority, but then it fails to meet other policy items. So again, that's something I'm concerned about, especially with the project that we had approved last year, where we had allocated funding to the parking. And I know that it was for the overall project and it's good for economic development. However, in trying to solve one, we are creating other issues, and we don't want to, at least I don't want us to invest in areas where we're creating other issues such as congestion and traffic. So we have to be very mindful about the direction we go in. And that's all I have for now.
Ms. Ashmere, Ms. Dawson want to follow up on one of the comments you made. Tracy?
So to your first comment, Councilmember Ajmera, I think we're prepared to talk a little bit at the retreat next week about where we're going with corridors of opportunity and our tools in the corridors. And also, a little bit to what we will talk about next week on that, is we're creating a lot of these tools, which we said we would do in last year's retreat. We're creating a lot of these tools for these corridors kind of as we go, you know, and it's very much in real time so that we can get the money out, get the assistance out. But a lot of people, there is a lot of confusion when we talk about the TIGs, that they should be in corridors. We're not keeping them out of corridors. I just want to make sure that's really
Absolutely.
clear. We're not keeping them out of corridors. Sometimes it's not the best tool. It's a tool that a lot of people know about. So they say, well, why aren't you using it, without a really in-depth understanding of why it works or doesn't work. Having said that, we're not keeping them out of the corridors. What we are doing is creating new tools to fit in the corridor. And so you'll hear more about that next week in the retreat.
And to your point, Tracy, Councilman Mitchell, I think you mentioned this as well, is, Mosaic Village, and think about that as an example. That project wouldn't have generated enough tax increment grant to support it in the way we did. So we have to look at the projects on a project-by-project basis to understand what is that best tool that best helps us to get to where we need to go. And if we have some projects that are, say, $15 to $20 million, and it generates $300,000 to $400,000 over 10 years from the city in terms of incremental revenue that we can reimburse for whatever public purpose that is, there may be a different tool out there that we can actually get that money out faster and at the same amount of money it is. And so we got to look at these on a project-by-project basis. And TIGs, as well as all these other tools, they're not a one-size-fits-all approach to anything. So we have to look at some of these. Some of these could be combined, but we just got to take a look at each project and what the project needs are.
Councilmember Winston, Happy New Year, sir.
Happy New Year. How you doing? Just a little connection issues getting on it. Thanks for having me.
Okay. All righty.
All right, and then lastly on this slide, I want to talk a little bit about some of the limitations we have, because these are not without their own limitations. With matching grants, corridor of opportunities, we do have some legal limitations on how we invest in small-scale projects. Ground-up development, as we've had several conversations about, is really difficult using these types of funds. So these funds are generally for rehab and for existing building stock. For anything that's coming out of the ground brand new, it's a lot more challenging for us to use these types of programs. The tax increment grant, again, it's generally suitable for higher value projects. There are legal constraints for workforce housing. So when we think about what are the public goods that we would like to do, there are certain things that we can and can't put money directly into to get that workforce housing. So if we wanted a workforce housing project, there are certain metrics it would have to actually succeed in order for us to put money into that project. Generally speaking, some limitations come down to how we look at public benefits. And right now we're looking at an above and beyond public purpose like infrastructure, parking, and so forth. We're looking at housing if it's part of the program. It's one way to maybe encourage a certain level of affordable housing and make more of a mixed income type of development, as well as NWSBE. We are working with others within economic development. I think you hear a little bit more about this later this afternoon, about ways we can get into talent development and how to incorporate some of those into these agreements. But we're working through some of that now. We do have some challenges legally, again, with that, as you've heard many times, requiring local hiring is illegal. But there are some things maybe we can do to help support incorporating some of that into some of these other initiatives we have going for us.
So you said Anna fixed that, so we can't have no, oh, I'm sorry, Anna, I was just making sure you were up. That's okay. All right. Go ahead, Todd.
Next slide, please. So I want to end with a recommendation. And so right now, we are not recommending any formal updates to our policy at this time. Right now, the policy may be thin and it may be 15 years old. It does provide the necessary flexibility and guidance for us to be successful with this tool. Keeping the policy as it is doesn't keep us from achieving council's objectives and goals. It actually helps us through the flexibility that's built into the policy as it currently sits. For example, if we were to start overly prescribing what's in the policy, it might actually reduce the amount of opportunities we have to partner with developers and create these strong, effective public-private partnerships that we've relied upon for several years. Now, In the past, we have not engaged the committee or council with basically confirming what the goals are of the council and committee. So I think that's one of the things that we can start doing is on an annual basis and saying, hey, let's get level set on what our goals and objectives are. These are the things that we're going into as council priorities as we're negotiating and having these partnership opportunities. What are they still the same? For example, right now, we're looking at housing affordability, MWSB participation, transportation and multimodal connectivity, talent development. Are there others that are out there, depending on what the priorities are of the council at that time? Are there others that we should be going for in some of these negotiations that we have? And I think that's something that we can certainly do, and I think that'd be helpful for us as we go out and we have these conversations with private partners, is understanding what are the needs and the priorities of council at that time.
Committee, any questions for Todd? Any comments?
I have a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Councilmember Graham?
Thank you. I just want to thank the team for all the work that they did last year on the corridors of opportunities. Certainly, I think we really kind of thought out of the box last year, and I hope that we can encourage that same type of thinking this year as well, as we strive to kind of push the envelope to do what is legally, legal within the statutes, but giving us more flexibility as a council to help more people. I think Councilmember Ashmere is correct, and she's reading my mind that hopefully at the retreat we can have a broader conversation about the investment that we'll make in the 2021 budget relating to the corridors of opportunity, especially on the economic development side. Although there's $24 million, there's really only $5 million for economic development. And as we begin to roll this thing out citywide, obviously we've already done it in District 2 and District 3, and we're pivoting towards District 4 and other areas of the community. I think you'll find out that $5 million is really not a whole lot of money based on some of the things that we're trying to do. So just want to kind of encourage that conversation at the retreat, as well as thanks staff for the work they did last year, and encourage the staff to really begin to kind of think out of the box, and hopefully with the new national administration, we'll get some more clear guidance from HUD on a number of things we can do in terms of corridors and investment along threatened communities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent comment, Councilman Graham. Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you. One of the things that I've heard from the smaller developers regarding the TIG, which causes some confusion, is that the language in the TIG policy speaks to being available or being appropriate for blighted areas or something. I'm not looking at the policy right now. That would be helpful for us to have a copy of the policy at the committee, at the strategic meeting. But can someone speak to what the policy does say regarding eligibility for TIGs? It speaks to something being in blighted areas or areas where there's no other funding available, or there's some language in the TIG policy that does lead to confusion, that it might be appropriate for smaller developers.
So Councilmember Johnson, I'll start and then I'll kick it over to Todd because he has, I think, the policy in his hand. And I know he's sent it out before. I'll have him resend it to the entire committee. Again, as well as council, if we get into that discussion at the retreat or in budgets. But the TIG, really, we have not geographically said where the TIG could and couldn't go. With our corridors work, obviously, we're very targeted in specific locations. I think we have said, laid out several things that are the intent of the TIG, right? And that would be to improve blighted areas or things like that. But it's not necessarily targeted for specific locations. As Todd said, we use it as a tool when it makes right economic sense. When we have something very specific that we're trying to achieve with gap financing, and that project generates enough out of the new development to work. So we don't look at it or think about it as a geographic tool as we do some of our stuff with corridors, some of our tools with corridors of opportunity. Todd, I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, and thank you for the question. I think the section you're referring to in the policy is section C, where section 2.C, that makes sense, where it says the provision of gap funding in economic development projects and business corridor and strategic plan geographies that add value to the city and generate growth that would not otherwise occur. So as Tracy mentioned, we're not precluding these areas from being, from taking advantage of the tax increment program. It's just a matter of a project. For example, back in 2008, I believe it was when Westfield Village, we entered into a partnership with Westfield Village, and that was right outside of Rattle Freedom Drive, and that was within our corridor geography. And so that was one that took advantage of that. So we have others that we would certainly want to participate in a partnership on these if the TIG is the right tool for that type of partnership.
Thank you. Could someone send that policy
Yeah.
over while we're during the meeting so I can take a look? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Ashmere?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So would this be part of our broader conversation at the retreat, policy discussion as well as the funding allocation? I know Mr. Graham had asked a question earlier about the funding, but I'm trying to figure out also about the policy discussion while other committee chairs are also present in the room where we can talk about policy from the holistic perspective.
Dimple, if I heard you correctly, you would like for us to have the policy discussion at the retreat while the chairs are present?
Yes, knowing that this really does overlap with other priorities that council has, especially our transportation plan, our environment plan, overall city planning. And I would like for us to get that committee's feedback on this policy, because if our actions interferes with their objectives and goals, I do want us to keep that in mind and make changes if necessary.
Councilmember Ashmere, I hear you. I'm just trying to figure out how do we facilitate that. Is there open discussion at the retreat agenda? Because I think the agenda's already been printed and.
So the agenda has been set. I do think, what I will say is, I do think there will be discussion areas where perhaps it can be brought up.
Okay.
Where we talk about various projects or various initiatives in the city. But Councilmember Ashmere, I definitely understand kind of what you're talking about, and I think I'm one of the biggest ones that pushes, all of our initiatives need to be working in the same direction, and thinking about that, and you'll hear, I think, a lot of that in the retreat, of how we think about land use to jobs to mobility and how that's all interconnected. But I also think that we have to, as what our recommendation was, is probably have more as a committee, more in-depth conversations about priorities and how we're seeing these TIGs work and specific examples of TIGs as well, and how it relates to the priorities at the time. I don't know that we'll get to that level of detail at the retreat.
So I have a follow-up question.
Go right ahead.
Could we possibly get transportation committee's feedback on this policy, looking at it from the overall planning perspective, and see what are some of the recommendations that they might have? I know this topic had come up in the past when we were working on Uptown project, and there were many colleagues were frustrated because it was, yes, helping us with economic development. However, it was creating other issues that council was trying to solve. So I would like us to get their feedback and make sure that we are not actually going backwards on some of our other priorities.
Councilmembers Ashmore, I hear you loud and clear. So let me do this tonight during the strategy session. During our meeting. Let me bring it up when we get to the Workforce Development Committee reports. Let me bring it up then and get input from other committee chairs.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Winston.
Thank you. Todd and Tracy and I have been having conversations about TIGs and overall economic development incentives and how we use it, period. And I think that's really where I think it's been alluded over, specifically talked about in Todd's presentation. I think that's really where we as a council should and have been asking to focus on is how are we implementing and utilizing our strategically using our total economic incentive package to achieve our stated goals and priorities. And sometimes when council's discussion has gotten contentious, it's when decisions have been made in the past, it seems, that don't align with current goals. As Ms. Eshmira commented on the 7th and North Tryon deal, one of the community's concerns, not just council's concerns, was, this deal was started years ago and the priorities are different. I also think about things like, the Scaly Bark development that the last iteration of council had to clean up, that had been started a decade or so beforehand, and things were different. So priorities today don't always translate to conversations that have happened in the past. So I am encouraged with the recommendation of establishing this annual check-ins. But I think we should. I think we need to go even a little deeper, and I would like to see that recommendation go a little deeper. Number one, I think the proper noun in here should be councils with the council to confirm priorities. These are council-wide priorities. Again, as Ms. Eshmira mentioned, these don't just rest. Our economic development incentives don't just rely on economic development policy. They rely on environmental policy, something that we talked about with the CF. How are we going to streamline that into things like economic development policy issues? I think we need to be more prescribed. I think staff needs to tell us what exactly, maybe not what exactly, but what this check-in and the confirmation of priorities will look like from council. You said what it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be too prescriptive. That doesn't allow staff, the flexibility to use their expertise if we're too strict. So, I think the retreat is the proper place to do this confirmation of priorities year to year. And we could come up with a document, a resolution, a statement, a letter, really specific, not specifically as I said, but saying what those priorities are. And therefore, we would be able to check in throughout the year when some of those legacy projects come up, when some disruptive opportunities or I don't know, a pandemic comes along and throws everything off, where we can reassess those priorities. But that process of confirmation of priorities is so important. It will be dynamic, but I think that's something that staff and council can do to create a defined process and kind of framework of how we're dealing with these overall economic development incentives. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Winston. And I think from this discussion, staff, we heard a couple of things. One, flexibility to give you also, you can continue to move, collaboration, ED and other departments, and then make sure our council priorities are included, and as we say, the annual check-in. So, and Councilmember Ashmere, I take the first step tonight as we try to get committee chairs input just on our TIG policy. So thank you for the recommendation. Todd, I appreciate it. Tracy, next item. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Johnson, I'm sorry. I just got, you get your hand raised. Go right ahead, I'm sorry. Councilmember Johnson?
Renee, you're on mute.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a couple points. There's a recommendation that no policy updates are recommended at this time. I'd like as the committee for us to review that policy before we accept that recommendation. We know that the policy is 15 years old. How much has changed in Charlotte in the last 15 years? We know the concern we've had from the public regarding the TIGs with Seventh and Tryon, and we're talking now with the university,
Give them to February. February.
Library, and I'd just like to see a copy of the policy because it wasn't sent in the attachment. So I just think for the council committee to put its stamp of approval on that recommendation, that we should see what we're accepting. I think the step to look at it annually is great, but let's look at it now as well, and that might be something that we can look at during the strategic planning session.
So Councilman Johnson, I like your idea. So let's, at our February meeting, as a committee, let's really dive into the policy. And so if you're okay with that, staff's like they're okay, we'll use our February meeting to really look into the policy before we make any adoptions, okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right. Great comment. What's next on the agenda? I apologize.
No, that's all right. So next, we have a workforce policy update with Fran. I will tee it up and then hand it over to Fran West. If you go back to the mayor's committee referrals back from the summer, we were essentially given 4 referrals, of which we kind of condensed some of those down, but one of the ones that continued to stand on its own was workforce development policy guiding city investment. And so we wanted to continue this conversation going, trying to resolve the committee referrals out and where we were going with that. So with that, I will turn it over to Fran, and she can tell you the work that we've been doing and where we are now.
Hey, Fran Pilot West, glad to have you. Fran?
Hey, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Perfect. Okay, well, hey there, Happy New Year. Thank you for the introduction, Tracy. I appreciate that. And if you could go to the next slide. So as Tracy said, the referrals that we received over the summer, early fall, were really around reducing unemployment, diversion programs, or corridors of opportunity strategy, and that policy guiding city investment. So that really took us down in this body of work to understand who is unemployed and why they're unemployed. Are the right jobs available for people who are unemployed? And then what can we do from a policy perspective to create opportunities for those residents in these high unemployment zip codes? Next slide. So today, we're really focused on policy recommendation. And just as Todd had said with the TIGs, our goal today is to really come out with this recommendation and then kind of put a bow on this so that we can continue to do the work to execute it and then really dive deep into our strategic unemployment plan. So today, what can the city do from a policy perspective to create opportunities for residents in high unemployment zip codes? Next slide. So things we know, I always like to start off with this slide. Things we know, we cannot mandate hiring practices, even though we would love to do that. We can set those expectations for industry through our words and investment, and we can't influence hiring practices. And I think this is where we have had the most success through building those trusted relationships in the business community. So today, for our policy recommendation, what we are going to suggest is that we reduce unemployment through creating opportunities for residents to gain successful employment in the construction industry, facilitated through city-led construction projects, required through the inclusion of a city value statement, workforce hiring, and wage reporting, and the recognition of apprenticeship programs. And so this policy recommendation, if you just go back one more time, David, This policy recommendation is really building off the success that I think everyone found in the Holder Ford Edison Leaper model at the airport and at the convention center. And so the intent with this statement is that when we put out city construction projects, which I would say is probably the best way for us to influence through our city spend hiring practices, what this would do is allow us to kind of start to build out a framework that would tie those two things together, our city council's goals around workforce with how we spend a lot of our money in construction, which I think we all recognize is a career path that's easy for people to get into, and that we have also seen a lot of success in skilled trades. So we know that there's a career path that is going to be able to provide a family a sustaining wage. So next slide. So we really looked at this as two phases. The first phase is something that we think we could implement pretty quickly. And so we would convene the construction industry to really initiate this partnership. That's something that we haven't done yet. We really wanted to get your blessing, and we wanted to understand that we were on the right path for you guys. We would then communicate our challenges and goals for workforce development through an inclusive value statement. So that would be pertaining to workforce development, creating these career job opportunities. And this would be in all of our city contracts. And then partnering with our industry partners, you know, the construction industry, our training partners, to talk about what this looks like and determine a level of participation. And again, this is all voluntary, right? So it's a value statement. We would come out and say what's important to us and see how we work together to achieve these goals, and then track it, measuring outcomes with these partners as well to see if this has been successful. So I would say that phase one is somewhat of a lighter touch than what you're going to see in phase two, but it's something that we can do quickly and get out the door in second quarter of this year, writing that statement and starting to incorporate it into all of our contracts and letting the public understand what we're trying to achieve. When we go to phase two, it gets a little bit more complicated. So for phase two, we would add some layers to this. So there are two types of projects. There's probably more than that, but I have two buckets of projects when we go to construction that I consider. So the first is one where we select a contractor based on qualifications. So for example, when we do design, build, or CM at risk projects, we can use a different type of contracting mechanism than like a low bid project. So for those projects where we are able to select a contractor based on qualifications, we would like to suggest evaluating the quality of those contractors to add to that qualification process workforce development initiative. So like, do they have apprenticeship programs or training programs, or who do they hire for? What do their wages look like? And start to evaluate contractors also on that metric. And then secondly, for those low bid projects, starting to collect information from them. So while we cannot mandate hiring practices, we could ask them to submit with their pay request. What did they hire anyone from our training partners? Maybe share some of their wage data. We need to think through that, but start to collect that information, because as y'all have heard me say multiple times, we like to have database solution, metric-based results, or database strategies, metric-based results. So it allows us to continue to collect that data to see if it's working or not. However, this phase two approach, while we like it, it's a lot to it in the sense of implementing it in the city. So we would really need to develop a diverse city team to come up with an implementation strategy, because there's a lot of different groups, right, that bid out projects and qualify contractors, and lots of steps to track this data. But we do think that we could get to, in Q3, a more robust policy around selecting of our contractors through a qualification process. So as we start to look at our ability to execute, and I will have to say, I thank Brent Cagle for his assistance with this and his experience at the airport. I took it from an ability to execute to medium from easy. My eyes were opened. So it's not going to be as easy, especially for the second phase. But the considerations would be, what would go into a value statement? Would only certain dollar thresholds need to do this reporting? We don't want to be a burden, especially on some of these small construction subs that are just getting started. Would we want to create an innovation fund to incentivize creativity in these training funds or training programs? What are our unintended consequences? When we start doing this, would the work cost more? If they would stand up apprenticeship programs, and then, really working through that necessary internal alignment to change those processes on the procurement and compliance side. The cost estimate would really be staff only, and we could implement this in fiscal year 2022. So again, third quarter of this year. And then, for staff, council member, you had asked that we talk about staff. And again, I really think that we would probably need one new staff member to assist with these workforce partnership engagement and liaison between the enterprise funds and general services. But I think that we could definitely get this work done.
So, Fran, really quick, let me just jump in. Councilmember Mitchell just said, are we putting a new staff person in our budget? Recognizing the budget year that we are looking at and the sensitivity around current economic conditions and things like that, there's a lot of different ways that we could come at this. So I don't want to suggest that we're asking for a new staff person necessarily. We could reallocate by looking at, in this new world of COVID, what are different people's roles and responsibilities? Can we find somebody within the existing organization to potentially help us? Things like that. So, but what I think Fran is trying to acknowledge here is it is a new layer of work. And so it just to point out to you guys that there's a need, but not necessarily trying to suggest that we should have new positions within the organization, especially in this budget year. So.
Thanks for that clarification. Next slide. So we talked about the policy, and I think that working through that on the construction side is something that could be really beneficial. Some things we still need to think through and sort out with our partners. But as I mentioned earlier, we still have a lot of other efforts underway to help our residents obtain and keep a good paying job. And those include, David, if you go to the next slide. We're still working on a study with Ernst & Young around unemployment strategies in our corridors. Our next step with that is we're going to start reaching out to employers. So we have right now still open that survey for our residents, whether you're employed or unemployed, to learn more about you. But then also we're going to launch them with our businesses. We're partnering with Charlotte Works and the Workforce Provider Council to enhance the Talent Force Network. This is really how we connect employers to our partners, to connect them to residents. And this is a critical piece of our ecosystem. When we win new jobs for Charlotte or these companies and we have these announcements, one of the things we tell people is, hey, we're going to help you fill your jobs. Like, we've got lots of residents who need an opportunity, and really making sure that connection's strong so we can do that work. Connecting businesses to those workforce partners who's going to screen and source the candidate. So not just on the workforce side, but also on the business side. You'll hear from Emily in a minute about the tech talent study and understanding how we best position our residents for careers in technology, and then launching our strategic employment plan. And our strategic employment plan, next slide, David, is something that you'll hear about at the strategy, or what is it, the summit next week. So there are a lot of things that will inform. It will inform defining jobs that are needed in our community for everyone to have opportunity, how we work with businesses, what kind of talent programs we invest in, land use and mobility, our partnerships and our tools to be successful. So we're really excited to have that conversation with you guys next week. Next slide. And so then what's next? So for the big pilot word, we would bring back some language before committee and full council for approval around the workforce policy around construction, city-led construction projects, and that value statement. We're going to continue to gather data from our workforce partners. And then all of this is going to really go into our strategic employment plan, which we're going to develop in 2021. And I think that's it for me today.
Fran, you lived up to your nickname, Fran Pilot West. My initial thought, Fran, as we talked about collaborating and making sure this policy can touch other initiatives, particularly the corridors of opportunity. We have some corridors with high unemployment, and to make sure our job strategy focus on those corridors, I think can be beneficial as well. I know I at least got 2 district reps on the phone, Councilman Graham and Councilman Johnson. So I'd like to get their thoughts too. Can we tie the corridors as well to some of this job strategy?
It makes sense. I think there's a natural parallel there to kind of try to accomplish both. Obviously, part of what we have to do in the corridor is to not only to revitalize it, but also begin to revitalize and invest in the people. And certainly one way to do that is making sure that they're gainfully employed. So there's a correlation there for sure.
I agree, Mr. Chair, and I know the committee and Fran and her team were working with Charlotte Works, I think, or NC Works, to gather that information. And we looked at these zip codes in our corridors of why people were unemployed. So I imagine the plan and the pilot would incorporate that information. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, District Reps. Councilmember Winston.
Hey, I'm here. Thank you. Hold on. Pull up my question. I wrote a little note down. Do you know? So with this kind of new direction, or this direction that we're heading in, do you plan on creating partnerships with labor recognized apprenticeship programs recognized by the Department of Labor? With organizations such as IBEW. Or the iron workers?
Fran?
Yes, sorry, I keep muting my phone. So I definitely think those would be great apprenticeship programs to connect with. I think that what we plan on doing too is really going out to the construction industry as well as the trades, skilled trades, to better understand like how those partnerships work and how we most connect them. I think one of the things when we started this off, we realized that industry-led initiatives work a lot better than us having to force something. And so I think where we already have these great apprenticeship programs, trying to build on the capacity of those would be much stronger than if we thought something out ourselves.
Cool. I would just, you mentioned a term there, industry standards. I would just like us to remember that industry is not just made up of companies, but the labor markets are part of those standards. And sometimes those national standards are different than what is happening on the local level or statewide level. So let's just be cognizant of that.
Councilmember Ashmere?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, a great job on the construction industry recommendation. I think that's a great program. And I also agree with Mr. Mitchell on aligning the job strategy with the corridors. And I know for Eastland Corridor, it presents a unique opportunity for us to address concerns that were raised by immigrant and refugee communities. And some of those recommendations had come from our internal department. I think Federico and Emily had sent us some of those recommendations. So I would like to see those being incorporated into our overall job strategy plan.
Excellent point, Councilmember Ajmer, and thank you for your hard work as we continue to work on that. But that's an excellent point. Let's collaborate and get that data included with our job strategy. Fran Powlett West, anything else?
I'm good. Thank you for your time today, everyone. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Fran. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Fran. Next up, we have Emily is going to give us a big overview, or a quick overview, I should say, on the tech talent study that we did in partnership with the Alliance. And you will see this, as Fran mentioned in her presentation, and we start to really shape out for you next week what this job strategy really is. You'll see reference to the tech talent study, so that's why it was important for us to keep it on today, just so you saw a quick overview of it. So with that, Emily, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tracy. Good afternoon, committee members, and Happy New Year. Wendy, if you could go ahead and launch the deck.
Emily, give us just a couple minute or so. It's loading.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and give you an overview real quick of why we did this study as the deck is loading. So when our team began leading business recruitment for Charlotte, you may remember we came out of the gate with several large technology projects, including expansions by AvidXchange, Microsoft, Stratified, as well as the announcement of winning Lowe's Technology Center. And in the last quarters of 2018 and 2019, we announced close to 4,000 new technology jobs. So our market was being recognized as the fastest growing tech talent market in the US. And we were getting a lot of inquiries around the explosive growth of this sector and availability of top talent from site selectors, consultants, company representatives. We were a bit of an enigma to these folks who had traditionally focused on big tech cities such as New York, the Bay Area, Austin, and Dallas. So it was critically important for us to be able to provide not just quantitative data, but also to take a deeper dive into the story of technology talent in Charlotte and hear directly from our employers, as well as our local talent, about the strengths, opportunities, and challenges in our market. So in partnership with the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance, we commissioned Slalom, the consulting firm, to conduct this study. Go ahead, next slide, Wendy. And our goal in this work is really to keep Charlotte in the top rankings for technology and to build a more cohesive and collaborative system supporting this sector. Next slide, please. So the Charlotte region continues to be ranked among the top locations. We were just recently ranked as number 5 in the CompTIA Top Tech Town study. We were number 1 in 2018. We have not slipped from the top 5 rankings over the last several years. And this is largely driven by our job growth, our cost of living, our quality of life, and future growth projections. So in an effort to continue to support this, we launched this study during the spring and summer. And I don't know if you are seeing that as small as I am. I don't know if you can make it any bigger, Wendy, but we did some surveys of our existing talent. We interviewed 255 of our technologists in our region, as well as interviewed 24 of our top tech employers and conducted focus groups with some groups of talent as well, and also interviewed our educational institutions and staffing agencies. I'm getting some feedback too from the community that they're not able to see these slides, but I know you guys are working on that. When you looked at the demographics of who we surveyed, we feel like they are representative of what we knew kind of the demographics of the technology talent market were, in terms of the makeup of a female to male age demographics, as well as ethnicity and race. Go ahead to the next slide, please. And one more. So today I'll share with you an overview of the findings and insights from this survey, starting with what we know about our technology talent today. So the story of our tech talent today is that opportunity and growth attracts talent to Charlotte. Cost of living and quality of life recruits people here, and then our community and culture retains talent in our community. And we also found that, you know, technology vendors, employers, and legislators are driving up this demand for technology talent, including more highly specialized skill sets such as data analytics, security, cloud. And COVID-19 and remote working have dramatically changed what tech talent looks like today and what tech talent is considering for an opportunity. We also found that career opportunities, competitive pay, cost of living, those are what are driving our relocation to the region. And then our community and our inclusive culture keeps tech talent engaged. Employers told us that entry-level talent is here and relatively easy to find, but our more experienced talent needs to be imported. And as you get higher up in the skill sets, it becomes a more competitive national search for top experienced talent. We also found that we have a lot of existing partnerships in the region that are strong and effective, but there are certainly opportunities to build on what's working to align on our future needs and talent strategies. We asked a lot of questions about the trends shaping tomorrow as well. And what we found and what folks told us was that, you know, they're really anticipating these kind of sharp increases in specialized technology skills. And while those create opportunity, we know that sometimes that can also limit growth for marginalized populations. So technology and associated talent considerations are going to continue to evolve rapidly. This disruption is going to quickly create new demands for the skills that we see in our region, as well as potentially alter kind of our attraction and retention strategies. Also, we're known as, you know, regionally as a strong technology market, but really not known as a great place to live or a strong technology market externally, outside of kind of our inner circles. And so we really need to look at opportunities to accelerate telling our story to a much broader audience. We also heard, right, from companies, from employers, that tech has gone from the back office to the front office. It is taking its place alongside other business functions at the core of company strategy. Oftentimes it's driving innovation and transformation. This is creating opportunity, but it's also challenging our existing technology workers to not only develop technological skills, but to develop business acumen, operational skill sets, team management skill sets. And this was found to be one of the kind of limiting factors for some of our entry-level talent in growing their careers in Charlotte. And then again, we have opportunities to strengthen our existing partnerships and forge new ones, particularly bringing in more perspectives from education and employers to promote shared strategies for talent development, attraction, and retention. So these findings yielded 4 recommendations that you can see on the left. And in the next slides, I'll be going through those in more detail. So go ahead, Wendy, next slide, please. So the first one is really, you know, we can't just do one study and then pat ourselves on the back for a job well done. This is really the beginning of an insights cadence that we want to create to help our market remain current on talent trends and also to inform our regional messaging. So, you know, technology will continue to push growth here, but the industry and talent are rapidly evolving. This has been further accelerated by COVID. So really what resonates today, and I hate to say it, but this study is almost already dated given that we're now a year into COVID. Our findings aren't going to necessarily resonate within the next 2 to 3 years. So we need to really work as a community to establish a regular insights cadence. And in our readouts with the participants and employers, everyone is on board for this. Everyone sees value in making investments to stay current with trends from the education perspective as well as the HR and recruitment perspective. So I think the city can play a role in helping to establish this continuous feedback loop and put this data kind of more holistically in front of the community on a regular basis. And we have been starting conversations with our existing technology collaboratives and our employers groups, such as the CELC, to discuss how we can kind of amplify this insight cadence. Next slide, please. So the second recommendation is to focus and refine our messaging, right, to reestablish our brand and boost recruiting of key skill sets outside of the region. So we're known as a great place to work and live, but not as strongly externally as we should be. So we are working with our partners, particularly the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance. And as you know, we've also recently launched Meet Charlotte, which is our city-specific business recruitment website. There will be tech industry-specific messaging featured on this page. And then in partnership with the Alliance, we're working on some of that broader regional and national messaging that will tell our stories. And one important finding that we heard is it's important to know the foundation of our financial sector as really what launched this accelerated growth in technology. But we also need to emphasize and kind of balance Charlotte's perspective with stories about startups and mid-market companies that really show the full variety of options for talent and companies considering relocating or expanding in Charlotte. Next slide, please, Wendy. So the third recommendation is to continue to invest to foster a diverse workforce and strengthen our programs designed to grow and fully develop our talent already here. In our meetings and readouts with the Alliance and the other stakeholders and the participants of the study, particularly the employers, leaning into the diversity of our technology talent has emerged as one of kind of the highest goals for the work of this study, as well as continuing to provide opportunities for traditional and non-traditional education and continuing education to support talent development and mobility. So we know that our technology professionals are self-motivated. They seek to be challenged. They seek, dynamic communities, but they can also move rapidly, right? And if we're not able to provide kind of the infrastructure of continued growth and skill sets that they need, they may look elsewhere beyond our market for their next opportunity. So it's really critical that we're able to hold up that we have the educational as well as non-traditional educational and training opportunities for our technologists. The large technology vendors such as Amazon Web, Salesforce, Google, they're kind of disrupting training. Tarek can probably speak about this much more accurately than I can, but through gamification and different training platforms, they're really bringing continued development straight to technologists without them having to seek out traditional paths. But we also know that these non-traditional pathways can be exclusive to those who aren't in the industry. And so that's why when we had our CARES money, we really leaned into providing training in the technology field for folks who had been displaced from their industries or who were looking to upskill, because it's critical that we, as a city and also a community, continue to provide open doors into this industry for those who may not come up through the natural kind of educational pathway into technology. Next slide, please, Wendy. So the fourth recommendation is really just to continue to strengthen our established partnerships with employers, our educational institutions, develop stronger relationships with the technology vendors that are aggressively pursuing opportunities in our market, all in the effort to kind of align on talent needs, messaging, and strategies. So we're exploring kind of what this looks like. Is it a more formal, collaborative or brand that signifies to the national market that we are a collaborative entity in our city? But beyond kind of the packaging of it, really developing an infrastructure to share strategies and metrics to understand what's working. How are we preparing our technologists for the future of this industry through education? How are we telling the message through talent attraction of what's really drawing and keeping technology talent in Charlotte? And how do we just kind of stay at the forefront of this growing industry in order to ensure our continued success? So, really looking for your insights as well as continued community insight into how do we foster that collaboration between our employers and our education to really just provide the right foundation and continue to be innovative in this sector. So I'll stop there and take any questions, but know that we are continuing conversations into the first quarter of this year and how we leverage this work, but as I mentioned, not let it become stagnant and continue to keep it relevant and informative to our stakeholders in the community. So thank you for your attention.
Emily, thank you. This information is great, and I like the fact that you said we have never been out of the top 5. I think that's a great selling point. We continue to grow. So I'm going to yield to my vice chair, who plays in this space quite often every day. So vice chair, any thoughts, any comments?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that this is a great first series of steps in this space. I think some of us who've been in this space for a while, a lot of this was a great confirmation of what we kind of inherently knew. But I think that confirmation is important because it puts credibility around it, that the city, after working with these partners, has done a study and has come up with a view of, hey, this is a great natural resource for us, but it's something we have to foster. So I think, intuitively, when you look at this, we have an amazing early stage kind of entry level pool of talent around technology. Everyone kind of sees that. And it's one of the natural resources that have enabled us to get a lot of the economic successes that we've announced in new jobs and things like that over the last couple of years. But they all kind of learn the more sophisticated, the more later stage, more enhanced technology skill sets they need, the more challenging it is. And right now, they primarily ship that stuff in from out of town. And if I had a nickel for every conversation that this council has had on, well, are they going to hire folks in Charlotte? I mean, the bottom line is they'll hire folks in Charlotte where they can find them with relative ease. And right now they have a challenge there, which gives us an amazing opportunity to say, we need to not just find early stage entry level talent to put in these jobs, but we need to continue on the journey with those folks as they go into the mid-level of their career, shepherding them into a career, not just a job. And that's going to enable true upward mobility and connect this into the broader job strategic plan that Tracy and the entire team are building right now. So it's an important step forward, but I think people probably look at this with one of two lenses: either, oh wow, that's highly informative and didn't know that, or we've been playing on this in the space for years, like, yeah, tell me something I didn't know. But I think the silver lining is it's going to put a level of credibility around it that's important.
Thank you, Vice Chair, because, I think at the top of my head, we mentioned Lowe's, but then, they over there near Music Factory. No, Avid Exchange, and we're talking about companies who have made an investment, and we have invested in them because of the IT jobs. Because Lowe's are what, 1,500 jobs for Lowe's?
Lowe's was 2,000.
2,000, and then I know, Vice Chair, you also, didn't we do a great doing some recruiting from international firms to,
Within international, and then I mentioned Stratified as well, because Stratified was a local homegrown.
okay.
And that's what Emily hit on, those, startups and mid-sized firms are just as important.
So, Emily, one question I have as we continue to collaborate, what role is our local universities playing? I know we got great talent at UNC Charlotte, we got great talent at Johnson C. Smith University, and so are our local universities joining us at the table?
Oh, absolutely. They are sometimes the first ones we call right when we're chasing a prospect and have questions about availability of talent, not just from an entry-level perspective, but keep in mind that our local universities as well as our community college fuels a lot of our continuing education and upskill opportunities. And so we, just as an aside, through some of our CARES money, we're able to fund scholarships for some of our existing workforce to grow their skill sets through those continuing education opportunities provided by our university and community college. So yes, the School of Computing and Informatics at UNC Charlotte, Smith's Innovation Center, Tech and Innovation Center are always at the table when we have these conversations about immediate talent supply available, as well as how we're working with our existing employers to provide opportunities for their talent to keep their skills, growing, and also, preparing for what's to come, continuing, to keep our talent market innovative and transformative as we rapidly move into the next phases of technology. So they are critical partners. We have regular conversations with them and look forward to advancing this work along with them.
Thank you, Emily. Committee, any more questions for Emily? Okay. Emily, stay tuned. I know you're coming back up, but Tracy?
Yes.
I turn it over to you.
Next up, we have Mr. Coker, who, are you still considered new?
I think I'm a veteran at this point.
Well, regardless of the actual number of days you've been here, I know you've been hard at work, and you wanted to give us an update on the disparity study and the selection of a consultant, right?
That's right. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and the entire committee. I know you had to fit us into this and gave us a bit of time just to present this update. As we indicated in the September meeting, the goal of CBI is to really take this program and advance it to a best-in-class model that we could be an example for the entire country. We're one of the larger cities, and so it's important for the work that we do in CBI. One of the important elements in driving the program and understanding where we are at any given point in time is the disparity study, which is done every 5 years. And so the goal of the evaluation committee, which I definitely want to thank all of those individuals who participated along with procurement, who guided us along the process, the disparity study is extremely important for the work we do. What is a disparity study? It's a determination of disparity that exists between the number of minority and women businesses, or MWBEs, to perform on city contracts and city utilization of these firms. Also, it's a determination to the extent which any disparity is attributable to discrimination. And the question in terms of why should we conduct the disparity study, it offers an objective analysis of contracting practices, again, over a 5-year period. It ensures a thorough approach to understanding and addressing the disparities that exist. And of course, it provides the legal justification for race-conscious and gender-conscious goal setting if disparity is shown to exist in any specific areas of contract. Next slide, please. I think it's very helpful if I provide some history of what we've done in the way of our diversity inclusion programs. In 1981 to 2002, we had a race and gender conscious program. And that program ran into problems in January of 2002 when the program was challenged, and as a result, it was dismantled. And then in 2003, a disparity study was completed. And then what followed was a small business opportunity, or SBO program, which ran from 2003 to 2013. And that program was a race and gender neutral program. Then in 2003, the City Council adopted another race and gender neutral SBO program. And then what followed was a disparity study, which was done in September of 2011. And then came along CBI, or Charlotte Business Inclusion, which was a MWSBE program, and that's where we are in the present. We did a study in 2017, and that's the study that we live off of right now. What I'm going to talk about at this point, though, is the next disparity study, which is the 2022 study. Next slide, please. This timeline gives you a sense of what we've done since September, and we've moved pretty rapidly. Again, we've taken this extremely serious and put in a lot of hours in getting to the point of where we are right now. In September, a draft RFP developed and approved for competition process. And then in October, the RFP was issued and put on the street. And we were fortunate that we had 6 proposals that responded to that RFP. And I would say probably 5 of them were really serious at what they did. They had contracts, and they really caused us to take some time to look at each one of those proposals. Then the evaluation committee selected a consultant, and here we are today presenting this information to you. What would follow is in September, the goal is to have the city execute a contract with the disparity study consultant that we selected. In terms of the evaluation process, what involved in the review was looking at the proposals through the qualifications, the experience, and each consultant's strategic approach. We also looked at the cost effectiveness and the value of what each consultant brought to the table. And then we looked at the SBE inclusion efforts. And then we created a short list where we interviewed 3 of those firms and allowed them to present a demonstration of what their plan was for the city of Charlotte. And then we contacted references, and that got us to the point where we were ready to make that selection. Next slide. The firm that we selected, and we believe that we hit it out of the park, or we will with this firm, because we determined they were really the national leader as it relates to these consulting firms. And that firm is Collette, Holt and Associates, or CHA. The particulars that we looked at that really allowed us to decide on this firm was their extensive experience of producing disparity studies, including ones for the cities similar in size to the city of Charlotte. Their principal, Charlotte Holt, is well regarded in the country as a leading expert in producing legally defensible disparity studies, and that was really important. And they had experience also in defending them in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. CHA's team balance is highly accomplished and experienced working together. And it was important to us that Collette Holt herself, the principal, is going to lead the study and work directly with our team. They presented a very detailed and well-communicated disparity study strategy, and they exceeded our MWSBE SBE goal of 10% by coming in at 15%. All in all, they had a deep knowledge and experience with B2G, which is the current MWSBE management system that we use, and that bodes well when they're going out there collecting data, and if there's any problems with it, they really understand what to do relative to B2G. Next slide, please. Now, moving forward, if we look at the course of the next 2 years, starting in March, and over the next 12 to 18 months from that period, the consultant will conduct their quantitative and qualitative study work. Then in March of 2022 to August, the consultant will provide a report and findings to Workforce and Business Development Committee and during council action review. The council then would adopt the disparity study report findings at the council business meeting, and then the CBI Advisory Committee reviews findings and provides input and recommendations. Then in September of 2022, the staff would present any revised CBI policies based on the collected recommendations to the CBI Advisory Committee and to Workforce and Business Development Committee. And then in November of 2022, the City of Charlotte will conduct a public hearing on the revised CBI policy during a council business meeting. And then December 2022, the revised CBI policy will be placed on council agenda for adoption. And at that point, the current study, will sunset, and then going into January 2023, we're ready to do this again. Again, this was an interesting exercise in that it happened in a short term, but a lot of hours were put in it. The committee took their time with it, with lots of hours. We carefully reviewed each one of them on its face, as well as looking at the what was said in their interviews, and we arrived at Collette Holt and Associates. That's basically what we've done and where we are today. Again, in the spirit of transparency, we wanted to present this information to you and answer any questions that you might have.
I'm going to echo Tracy's comments, Stephen. Great job. You hit the ground running starting in August, and here you are putting something like Disparity Study out in the market and has already selected a firm. Committee members, any questions for Stephen? Nobody? Okay. Who? Councilmember Ashmere. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a great job. I think it was a really good presentation walking us through what has happened in the past. So certainly appreciate it. And by the way, great slides. We can, I think this is a model we should use in terms of the slides. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Stephen, thank you. Looking forward. Ms. Johnson. Councilmember Johnson. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I was just going to say, great job. I am looking at Collette Holt and Associates website right now, so that's exciting that we're looking at a change in culture. And I was just thinking if that's something that we could expand beyond looking at our contracts, if that's something we could look at in the city in different hiring aspects, maybe improving minority recruiting in CMPD. So just something that I'm thinking about, or we can think about. But great job, Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson.
Vice Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Is this the proper time to ask if, Chair, you and I have talked about this for years now, is this the proper time to ask if we could scope in veterans into the scope of a disparity study to see, that's obviously been the holdback we've had of not having the disparity data to be able to understand where the veteran issue lies within this broader disparity topic. Is this that time, or is that later in this process?
Vice Chair, excellent point. Thanks for reminding me. Stephen, because some of us are kind of passionate about our veterans.
As we should be.
Right.
This isn't the time, only because that has to be something that's reflected in our proposal that was put on the street. However, the question has been brought up, I would say at least a half a dozen times to me, and I believe that if we were to do that, it would start with council.
Okay.
Council members saying this is something we want to do, and then that vote would be put on the table, and that's, from my understanding, the process that would be needed.
Okay. So Vice Chair, let's you and I bring this up at the retreat.
Okay, sounds good.
And then, to your point, Stephen, and let council give you some direction. But thank you for reminding me. Good job. Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Tracy, don't we have
We have one more
Ms.
item. Thanks, Stephen, for all the hard work, by the way, and getting that in very record time.
Thank you, Tracy.
So the last item we have is the update on Renew. You guys have heard us talk a lot last year about the Open for Business and all the different initiatives into this. And the first class of participants graduated on December 17th, and so we wanted Emily to give a quick update on that. Before we do that, though, I have to acknowledge Emily, because she received a statewide award from the Research Triangle Clean Tech Cluster at the 2020 Clean Tech Innovation Awards as the Diversity Program of the Year.
All right.
For Renew. So,
come on now. Great praise report. Great job.
This is a great, we talked about, and I think Councilmember Ajmer brought it up earlier, about connecting initiatives within our city. And so if you look at the work that Emily was doing, how it ties to the American Cities Climate Challenge, and how she got innovative with that group about what could we do, and then we wrapped it into the CARES and COVID relief. And so it's a great example of collaboration amongst many initiatives. And Emily, well-deserved, congratulations. So now, with that, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tracy.
No pressure, Emily. You just had to continue to do great work. Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, I look forward to the opportunity to do so in this new year. And thank the council really for your support of this program. It's been a really fun ride to launch this, and Councilman Mitchell, as you know, at the graduation, when you get to interact with the participants on a one-on-one, well, virtually interact, you understand that the human impact, right, of the work that we do that we often don't get to see on the front lines. And so thank you for participating in the graduation, and it was definitely a feel-good at the end of a long, arduous year to see their excitement as they completed the program. So as Tracy mentioned, this Renew was a really kind of generation 2 of Project Peace, which was a former skilled trades program we had. We were really able to take that foundation and enhance it by doing a couple of things. The first one, most important, in my opinion, is providing paid skilled training. So providing a wage of $15 an hour to these participants allowed them to focus on their training, participate in their training during the weekday, and really consider this, a job for the 14 weeks that it took for them to complete and get intensive training in HVAC and electrical to prepare them for a career in this field. So we have 39 participants that have been enrolled in this first cohort. 22 from the Urban League graduated in December, and the remaining participants are completing their coursework with our partner Goodwill and will graduate in February. Another key tenet of this program and critical to its success is strong corporate partnership on the front end, with an ask of these companies to provide jobs to our graduates. And so we've had exceptional corporate support through Train Technologies, MSS Solutions, and others in the industry who have really leaned in heavily. Train has activated their entire vendor network, participated in career days, mock interviews, and so that has been a really critical part of the secret sauce for this enhanced program. We're going to keep going. We're probably at this point, I know Ted and McDaniel's watching with the Urban League. They have most likely made invitations to participants for the January cohort that will begin on the 18th of this month. And we're also going to tell the good news and feature success stories of our participants on our Open for Business website and additional collateral. Next slide, please, Wendy. So just a quick update on our first cohort with the Urban League. You can see their awesome smiling faces. 3 of these individuals are currently working full-time, and the rest are in conversations with companies and going through the interview process. We had a 90% pass rate for the EAP Universal certification. That is the industry requirement for being able to work in this field. Also, through their time in the program, we were able to provide resume building opportunities. They participated in mock interviews. On the 3rd of December, we had this really cool virtual career day. I've been to a lot of career days. This was my first virtual one, but it went really well. And through the help of Zoom and breakout rooms, individuals were able to connect one-on-one with company representatives. And then on December 17th, we graduated this class. So wanted to share just some good news and testament to your financial commitment to these programs, and really as help you understand that we are integrating different kind of success metrics and data-driven success metrics into understanding more about how these programs can be effective in our community, and certainly look forward to continuing to do so in the coming months with this program. And the last slide, as Tracy shared, Renew is a award-winning program. So we did receive statewide recognition recently as a diversity program of the year in clean technology. Sustainability is a critical component of this program. Going back to my previous presentation, helping residents prepare for careers of the future, not just for today. And Dave Regenery from Train will be the first to tell you that sustainability and HVAC is critically important to addressing climate change in our communities, and so equipping these participants with state-of-the-art training and technologies and understanding sustainability in this industry is a pillar of the program as well. So thanks for the short time today to share an update on this. We'll keep the updates coming, but this has truly been a great investment that you have made in changing the lives of our residents and preparing them for successful careers. So thank you.
Councilmember Ashmere.
Oh, I didn't put my hand down, but great job, Emily. Very grateful to you for aligning with our CF goals. A great model for collaboration that we can leverage on with other economic development opportunities.
Thank you, Councilman.
Emily, and I'm gonna say this, I say this on graduation day. It's one thing to do a program, it's one thing to have plans, but you need someone who has passion to carry it out. And you have really operated this program with so much passion. Your demeanor, your professionalism, the way you treated both our partners, the Urban League and Goodwill. I just want to say thank you for being a great ambassador for the Renew program. And our next comment will be by Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Johnson? Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to take my hat off to Emily as well. Thank you, Emily. Great job on the program. This is a program that meets people where they are at Goodwill and Urban League. So shout out to both those organizations and to the graduates. So this is exciting and innovative. So thank you.
Thank you.
Staff, in closing, what a way to start off 2021. You're talking about the workforce development plan, the Renew plan, the technical study, our disparity study, workforce development pilot program. I think this is why we all run for office, to make a difference for our citizens. So thank you for getting us going in the right direction. I look forward to our retreat coming up January 11th and 12th. And then I think we got a strategy session later on this evening. Ms. Ashmere, I'll be sure, to your point, to get input from other committee chairs on what we're doing. And let me go around to make sure all hearts and minds are clear before we depart. Vice Chair, anything?
Good to go.
D2, Councilman Graham. All right. Granddad had to leave. District 4, Ms. Johnson.
No, thanks. Great job, committee. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, at large, Ms. Ashmere. Okay. Staff, thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Bye-bye.